goal is to educate, to empower these veterans and their families, and then as they build financial freedom, of course, they're going to serve other people. So that creates a ripple effect throughout the country.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back, Championship Leadership Podcast. We got Buddy Rushing with us here today, actually out of Carlsbad, California, and he's got some very unique stories to bring to us from his upbringing that I think will really serve us, and maybe even some of you guys will be able to relate to. But you've done a lot of great things and a number of different businesses, a lot of success, but a lot of failures along the way as well, right? So this will be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to ask this before we do kind of kick off into the meat of what we're doing here. Championship Leadership's the name of the podcast. So what comes to mind for you? What does championship leadership mean to you when you hear that?
Yeah, I think it means a lot of different things, right? Because I was in the Marine Corps. I served in the Marine Corps as a platoon commander and a company commander, and a bunch of different aspects. And leadership in the Marine Corps, right, is about accomplishing the mission. It's about taking care of your Marines. It's about it's about motivating and inspiring people, but really it's a completely different experience in the Marine Corps than it is in the civilian world, right? Because in the Marine Corps, everybody's already volunteered. They're part of they've been through the same training. They have the same mission mindset, and also, they have to follow orders, right? So it's you still need to motivate, and you still need to earn people's trust and take care of them, but it's a much different expectation. It's like if you say, hey, be here at 0700 on Monday. If anybody's not there right at 0700 or before, they get smoked. In the civilian world, you say, please, oh, please, will you show up? And if half the people show up, you're like, yay. And third of them are late. And it's, so crazy, it's a complete leadership in the civilian world is completely different than it is in the military. Yeah. And what I found in building businesses out in the civilian world is, it definitely, you have to meet people where they're at. Right. Yeah. Everybody's different. Everybody's unique. Everybody's motivated by something different. You have to have a lot, or at least from my perspective, you have to have a lot more compassion. You have to have a lot more understanding and a lot more emotional intelligence. Yeah. And everything like that. Right. So leadership out in the civilian world and in the military, two completely different things, but both vital, and both with their own set of challenges.
Yeah, so true. I was a lieutenant in the Army, and I can definitely relate to that. It's I think there's definitely some things that carry over, but yeah, much different, especially from an accountability standpoint, civilian to military. Tell us a little bit about you and your backstory and kind of how that brings you where you are today and what it is you're up to today for the listener.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for me the biggest thing was, I grew up in East Tennessee, like you said. I was the youngest of 5, and my parents worked hard, but something that I learned later is, nobody teaches, and very few people pass along to their children financial fundamentals or being able to think like the wealthy. And like we grew up really poor. Like we grew up on food stamps and WIC. And for us, the subject of money, like you weren't allowed to talk about money. The subject was bad. It was right. And rich people were evil. And clearly they're you can't trust them because right. That was the mindset and the culture. And so that's what I grew up in. And just never, for me, poverty was just a reality. That's what it was. Right. I remember, I would get 1 food stamp a month as my allowance. And we would go into the store and you could buy something that was less than $1, and I remember probably every single time we went grocery shopping with my mom, we would pile all the groceries in. That you had the WIC stuff that was free, right? For it was like government, sponsored. But then with the stuff you had to pay for, we never bought everything in the cart ever. We would always get to a point where it's like, okay, my mom's like, okay, we're out of money, so take the rest of it back every single time. And that was just the way we grew up. I never realized that was odd or strange until I started getting older. And there are definitely amazing lessons that you learn from living a simple life and living a hard life. And I'll say that, resilience and ingenuity, being able to figure out creative ways to like make stuff happen when you don't have any money, um, was definitely something that I took from that. But call this fortunate or unfortunate, there was also a lot of pain. There's a ton of pain when you grow up in poverty. And I mean like physical pain from, you hurt yourself, you don't go to the hospital, you don't have insurance. So you just,
Yeah. Wow.
you just stitch it up yourself, or you just like, figure it out. Cavities, tons of cavities in our teeth because like hygiene was just not something that was taught or important. And so,
Hmm.
if your cavity gets too bad, you literally, I remember my dad pulling his own teeth out, right?
Wow.
And and then there's, for us at least, my dad, he worked hard, but he had difficulty holding down a job, and he had a pretty severe drinking problem, and with that came, a lot of anger and violence
Hmm.
and things like that. And so you grow up in that kind of environment, and you learn to protect yourself. You learn to like, unfortunately, you learn not to trust people as well, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so that's something that I had to work really hard at getting over, is my distrust of people. But I will tell you, it armed me with a lot of skills that when I went into the Marine Corps directly related.
I
Like,
bet. Yeah.
you go over to Afghanistan, and you have to protect yourself. You can't trust
Yeah.
people. Like
Right.
you have to be accustomed to violence. And so, I of course would never wish that my upbringing on my children, but I couldn't change it. And so all I could do was take the lessons from it and try to apply those into, creating the best life that I could create. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's how it all got started, at least.
Well, how did, yeah, it's, when you talk to somebody that has a story like that, it seems like, I don't know, that maybe they never find a way out of that pattern for themselves, or
Absolutely.
they find a way to do it. Obviously you did. So how did that drive you to create something different for yourself? Was that something that you like kind of determined from a young age, man, I'm like, I'm not going to live this way? Or, what was that like for you as you were growing up?
Yeah. I heard a story whenever I was a little kid. And it was a story about two twin boys that were
Yeah,
born into this family, right? I'm sure you've heard this story. I
I
didn't, I
have.
had
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
heard it before, right? And the father was an abusive alcoholic, and the one boy grew up to become an attorney, and he built a beautiful family, and he inspired people. And the other person grew up and became a felon and went to prison. And when they interviewed each of them and said, "You're twin boys growing up in the exact same environment. What drove you to this path?" They both had the exact same response: "I grew up with an abusive alcoholic father. That's the reason I'm in jail. I grew up with an abusive alcoholic father. That's what drove me to change that cycle."
Right.
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 And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that struck with me hard. And I was like, wow, so I have the ability to potentially change the narrative, because my dad was, I also learned something that helped me have compassion for people. And it was, people are doing the best they know how. That's what somebody, even if someone's evil, they're, it's not like you don't protect yourself from them, and it's not like you even forgive them, but it helps you understand and have compassion for them as a human. And I'm telling you, like, the capability, the superpower of compassion, it's a critical ingredient that I've found to a happy life, to a life without being surrounded by bitterness and anger and all of that. With all that stuff is so easy. That's the natural response. Bitterness and anger and jealousy and all those things, they're the natural human response to those types of situations. But the people that I've seen that are the happiest, that have the most value in their life, are the people who have compassion for other people. And
Hmm.
so, it was like, I was like, okay, well, I'm still scared of my dad. I still don't want him to hit me, and I still don't trust him,
Yeah.
but he's doing the best that he knows how.
Yeah.
And so I looked at that, and I was like, okay, so how do I break this cycle, right? Because my dad grew up being abused by his father, his stepfather, his other stepfather, all of his brothers and sisters. It was a drug fueled, alcohol fueled, violence fueled life that he grew up in.
Hmm.
And then he went to Vietnam. He got drafted and went to Vietnam, right? And
Hmm.
of course, we all know that what a toxic sort of environment those
Yeah.
guys faced when they came back home, right?
Right.
And so I looked at that and I was like, well, my dad is just doing the best he knows how, and he comes from right, but I can break this cycle. And I
Yeah.
don't know how it's going to happen, but I also have faith that I was put here on this earth for a purpose, and I need to figure out what that purpose is, and it has to be part of it has to be to break this cycle of poverty and this cycle of abuse. And so that's
Hmm.
what, as a kid, I wasn't able to articulate it like that.
Right.
I'm
Sure.
41 now, so I've,
Yeah.
spoken about it quite a bit. As a kid, I wouldn't have told you all that. But I remember in my yearbook in, I think, seventh grade, we're supposed to put in it, what do you want to do with your life? And I responded with 2 words, something big. That's it.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
And it was totally undefined. Right.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that it's very unlikely that my father at any point in his young life said he wanted to do something big
Yeah.
or other. Right. And it's like,
Right.
it's a mindset. That's all it is. It's a
Yeah.
mindset. And you don't have to have all the answers. You just decide that you want to change the narrative, change your situation. And then your brain starts looking for opportunities to do that.
Yeah.
It starts with the mindset
Yeah.
shift, like you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that makes sense for what you're doing today, because and maybe tell us a little bit more about that. But you help educate a lot of military veterans, right, on how to build wealth through real estate investing. Is that correct? And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just hearing your story, it kind of makes, in my mind, it makes sense. At least I don't know if it makes sense in yours, but like to come from where you came from, to not only get yourself out of that, but to be able to, go out and help others to do the same.
Here's what I think. The idea behind White Feather, which is the company I named it after Carlos Hathcock, Marine sniper. But the reason behind White Feather, the whole idea is, all right, let me think about this. Everybody who's serving in the military or has served in today's day and age, right?
Mhm.
Um, the people of my generation, your generation, so on, they all volunteer. There hasn't
Yeah.
been a draft since the 60s, right?
Right.
And so what kind of people volunteer to potentially put their body in harm's way and even if they have a job that isn't physically dangerous, they're still sacrificing. Their
Right.
families are still sacrificing. What kind of person puts themselves into volunteers to go into an organization where they're going to sacrifice and it's not for the money, right? The money is not great. The sacrifice is very real and they're doing it in service of their fellow American.
Hmm.
What do you think happens when you help that person, when they get out, build financial freedom so they can do whatever they want with their day? What do you think they fill their day with? Think about that. What are
Mm.
your thoughts?
Well, I would think it'd probably be to turn around and do something similar to help other people.
That's exactly, yeah, yes,
Yeah.
sir, absolutely. And you
Yeah.
and I didn't talk about this before.
No, not
I
at all.
didn't know what your response was going to be,
Yeah.
but think about it. And I talked to a bunch of people, and I all got the same response. It's like I think if we help somebody who has a heart for service to build financial freedom, they're going to continue to serve.
Yeah. Right.
And then so that was the idea several years ago whenever we started our training programs and investing programs and all that stuff. And now we've helped you know hundreds of people build financial freedom. 30 something people like become millionaires, right? and,
That's
and these are
awesome.
normal
Yeah.
people, like these are
Yeah.
normal military people,
Yeah.
and they built generational wealth. And guess what they're doing? They're
Yeah.
Every time I send an email, hey, can you help this guy out? Yeah, sure, I'll get on a call with
Yeah.
him. I've got a couple out in Jacksonville, Carly and Jared, who run $100 million short-term rental empire that they built. They started building it whenever they're going through. I have a training program called the Real Estate Investing Accelerator, and they were in the accelerator when they decided to quit their jobs out in Silicon Valley,
Oh,
take their
wow.
family, drive out to Jacksonville, Florida, and build a short-term rental empire. And now it's worth about $120 million. And
Wow.
that's impressive and that's awesome. But what's more
Yeah.
impressive is we had a girl named Elena who came in, and she was I mean, she had credit card debt, she had almost no money, no experience, like very, very starting at the bottom, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she had this idea of buying these properties, $80,000 properties in Mobile, Alabama, and then converting them to short-term rentals, to Airbnbs, right?
Yeah.
And she didn't have any money to do it, and she didn't know how to do a syndication or how to do all this other stuff. And so I sent an email out, and Carly, who's co-running this $100 million empire, spends like 3 hours on the phone with Milena, tells her everything she needs to know about building it, and then Milena launches it, and she's now very successful. Carly didn't get paid for that.
Yeah.
She didn't hesitate to
Yeah.
drop what she was doing and spend time. Why? Because people who have a heart of service, if you help
Yeah,
them build
absolutely.
financial freedom, they'll continue to serve.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. That's powerful. What obviously you've been a leader, a coach, a mentor for many people, especially through your program. Who have been some of those in your life that have helped you, and maybe, more so, what's been some of the characteristics that really stood out in those individuals to you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the um what started it all is, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it shifted my mindset, right? And
Yep.
so, definitely read that book. And understand that it starts with a mindset shift. That's it. Right? We know for a fact, and and I know people who are multimillionaires, but if you took all of their money away from them, in a few years they'd be back.
Yep.
Why? Because of the mindset and because they realize the power of the network, right? You build a massively powerful, high trust network of people that you provide value to, and they provide value back. And it doesn't matter if you take away their financial resources, their network and their knowledge and their mindset is going to build it all back, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so it starts with mindset. But I will tell you, the guy that really taught me how to do business the right way was a guy named Matt Owens. And I at the time, Kimberly, my wife, and I had, we bought real estate, we'd invested in rental properties, we'd taken all the educational courses and all that stuff, and we, had done a lot of different types of deals, but nothing to scale, nothing really. We weren't financially free or even close. I was still active duty Marine Corps, and
Okay.
I run into this guy, Matt Owens, who runs a turnkey flipping business in Memphis at the time. This was like 7 years ago. A turnkey flipping business, for those of you that don't know, is you buy a property off market, usually that's run down, and then you renovate it, you put a tenant in place, you put management in place, and then you sell it to an investor. And the investor will typically put 20% down, get a bank financing, and now they've got a cash flowing rental property. That's why it's called turnkey, right?
Yeah. Right.
So we were in the process of selling some of our houses out here in California, and then we wanted to do a 1031 exchange into cheaper properties, right?
Yeah.
Because you sell a house in California, you can buy like 6 in Memphis,
Yeah.
right? And so we were in the process of doing a 1031 exchange, and I was working with Matt, and he delivered on his promise. He was very nice to work with. He was very professional, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. Let's do more of this. And so he was like, yeah, sure, man. I've got like 35 properties coming down the pipe. And I said, man, I tell you what, like I have had for 10 years, my wife and I have been investing, and all my Marine buddies have been wanting to be a part of this, but I never had any deals for them. It was only, I was doing this in my spare time. I said, I'll tell you what, I will educate them, I'll train them, I'll show them how to analyze properties, and I will bring buyers to the table. You bring the deals, make sure they're the highest quality, make sure that the experience is good, and we can do this, right? And just give me a
Yeah.
little cut of your profit. And so he was like, Roger that, let's do it. Boom. So I start sending messages out to my Marine buddies, and they come flooding in. They're like, dude, we've been waiting for this opportunity. This is
Yeah.
amazing. Right.
Yeah.
And it went over. And I remember it was February 2017, a Saturday morning, when I started sending messages. And from that day, things have never been the same. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
In over the course of the next 3 years, 3.5 years, we bought over 300 properties from him.
Wow.
We meaning the collective group, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that group is now called White Feather, and now we have people all over the United States that are building financial freedom. So that's where that started. But your question was, what example did he set? And I can tell you, I've
Yeah.
never met anybody that did business like him. Meaning, he was always kind. He was always looking for how to add value to me. He was always
Hmm.
and to mentor and to help and to give me ideas. It wasn't just about the transaction. He
Yeah.
was trying to legitimately make my life better and make me better. But mostly it was when things went wrong, because things go wrong in any
Yeah.
business,
Right.
in any real estate, in any everything. You will have things that go wrong. Some of them are not your fault. Some of them are your fault,
Yeah.
right? You make mistakes. And sometimes you just miss things that you should have caught. And sometimes the Fed raises rates, by
Right.
6% in a year,
Yeah.
and no one really could have seen that level of
Yeah.
rate
Yeah.
increase coming.
Yeah.
And that throws ripple effects into it. I know people who, businesses have the value has been cut in half because of
Mm.
that, and
Yep.
because of inflation and all this. So those things happen, but when they happen, how do you respond? Do you respond by blaming other people? Do you respond by really circling the wagons and saying, this isn't my fault? Or we have a contract, so you can't sue me, or you can't do that, right? There's things that people do that are not about identifying the problem and working together to solve the problem, right? Taking
Yeah.
ownership of mistakes we make, identifying the
Right.
problem. And to you, Nate, like you're listening, you're like, well, yeah, of course that's what you do. That's what we do in the military. You don't
Yeah.
like, you don't blame other, especially as an officer, you don't blame other people.
Right.
If the
Right.
buck stops with you, you take ownership of it, even if it wasn't your fault, and you fix it. And that's what Matt did over and over. And he did it with grace, and he did it with generosity. And he took less money. Many, many, many times he made less money than he could have.
Yeah.
But he
Wow.
made a
That's amazing.
friend and a loyal business partner out of me. And
Yeah, absolutely.
we've now made him millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Thank you. What's the big vision for you guys for what you're creating, what you want to do, the impact you want to make here, in the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah, well, the impact is generational, right? That's the goal. The goal is to educate, to empower these veterans and their families. And then, as they build financial freedom, of course, they're going to serve other people. So that creates a ripple effect throughout the country of people that are leading with a heart of service, but they now have, like, so veterans they still want to do this. It's just most of them, when they get out, they can't afford to do
Yeah,
something other than get a job or whatever, right?
sure.
So it's to create a generational ripple effect that ultimately will impact, millions of lives. And but for the near term, we actually, so White Feather is like, think of it like special forces training, right? You come into it, you get the training, you learn how to do all this different, market analysis and deal cash flow analysis, tax and legal, and all this stuff, right? And then they go off and they build businesses and they build generational wealth. Well, okay, that's fine, except there are millions and millions of military and veterans that are just not at a place where they could handle intensive training like that, right? And
Yeah.
so they want, what they need is to learn how to pay off credit card debt, to learn how to increase their credit, to use their VA loan to house hack and live for free, to
Hmm.
maximize their VA disability rating that they deserve, that they earned, but almost no one applies for,
Yeah.
right? To learn about the different VA benefits that they have that are right there, to learn how to understand taxes and to mitigate the number one expense in Americans' lives, which is taxes.
Hmm.
The number one expense of any American, overwhelmingly, right,
Yeah.
is taxes, unless
Right.
they're
Yeah.
evading taxes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Totally.
then that's a whole other ball game that
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want any part of.
Yeah.
So what we've launched is a community called Veterans for Financial Freedom, which is a free community, and it's basically for everybody. And what we do is we have virtual master classes that teach. We had one on the VA loan. We had one recently on disability benefits. We have in-person workshops. We have, we had just had a financial freedom summit in Vegas a couple of months ago, where 300 people came, and it was like we brought in speakers, and people were
Very
just
cool.
buzzing afterwards. They were like, "This is
Yeah.
amazing."
I bet.
And there was no run to the back of the room and buy something, right?
Yeah.
And they were like,
Sure. Right.
we all, you've been to all these
Yeah.
conferences, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's always
Yeah.
a sell, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but they
Yeah.
loved the
For
fact that
sure.
we didn't have the sale, right?
Right.
That we just wanted to provide value. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so we've got Veterans for Financial Freedom, which is this community now, and we got about 750 people in it in 2 months. So there's clearly a lot of interest. And
Yeah. No doubt.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the goal, is to bring that community to a huge amount of people. And then we have other training programs, and like, as you know, it's kind of like, think about it like, if you're interested in joining the army, the first thing you do is you go and you get free information, right? And you read it and you learn about it, and you learn the way that the army can change your life, right? And then you learn the Marine Corps is like a better version of the army, so you go over there. And
Yeah.
then if you're really trying to change your life, that information alone won't change your life. If you're really trying to
Right.
change your life, you go through boot camp, right? And when you go through
Yep.
boot camp, you learn all the skills that you need to actually execute as an army soldier, or whatever. And then at some point, maybe you say, you know what, I want to level up my game, and I want to become an officer, or I want to join the special forces, or I want to become a pilot, or whatever. You go through intensive training for that as well. So
Yep.
that's how this works. Is, you know the community itself, there's tons of information, but we do have training programs that help people level up to go reach financial freedom, and that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
So
Wow. Love it. Yeah. I love the framework too, right? Specialization, I suppose, as you go on. So learn on about different
it's
areas. I
just
mean, real estate, there's so many different ways you can do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And what we've found is that so many people, when they leave the service, and I know you went through this, I went through this, when they leave the service, they miss that camaraderie. They miss the
Yeah.
community,
Yeah.
right? And the sense of accountability and purpose and all that. And that's what we've recreated within
Yeah.
Veterans for
Love it.
Financial Freedom.
Absolutely. Well, let's shift gears here a little bit. I always like to ask this question. I think we've all had some critical moments in our lives, many for some of us. And so, yeah, I'd like you to think about a time you made the decision that you have, which has you where you are today. But, had you chose differently, you could be in a very different place inside of your life. I think there's a lot of people going through those moments, and there's always some strength and some power in hearing how others have navigated certain moments or certain times like that to help maybe them make a decision. When they're in that fork in the road, right, trying to decide to go left or right. Is there a moment that you could share with the listener?
Yeah, the first one, so I read Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was in Afghanistan, my first tour, and
Okay.
I came back with no education, no knowledge, no anything. It was just a mindset shift, right?
Yeah.
And so I I
That
have
is a
this
crazy powerful
tendency.
book too, by the way. And
It
like,
is
it's so many people will reference that book. So yeah, if you haven't read it, definitely do. Yeah.
absolutely, and it's a quick read, right? You can read it
Yeah.
in like a couple
You
hours.
don't want to put it down. Yeah. It's
No,
great.
exactly. Yeah, and it's easy. It's easy to read. It's very easy to
Yep.
understand. It tells it anyway. So I read that, but what I will tell you is that may help you shift your mindset, but you need to educate yourself. You
Yeah,
got
for
to
sure.
get the knowledge, right? And I did not do that. So I went into 29 Palms, California as my next duty station because I was stationed in Oki whenever I did that first pump. So I go into 29 Palms, and all I knew was buy real estate, fix it up, and sell it.
Yeah, right.
Right? I didn't even know
Yeah.
what a market was. Didn't know how to
Yeah.
look at the market. Any of that. And so I went into 29 Palms, and I tell this story partly as a way to kind of numb the pain.
Yeah.
um, so I go into 29 Palms, and I go to this real estate agent office, just dilapidated, rundown office. And I go in and I ask the guys, like, hey, listen, I want to buy an old piece of crap house and renovate it, and then I want to sell it and make a lot of money. Is this a good market to flip? And he
Yeah.
goes, June 2007 is a fantastic market to flip. So I go out and I buy a house. That, like, literally a week later, I
Wow.
had an offer, and I ended up buying a $152,000 house, a little 2 bedroom, 2 bath, completely outdated. And over the course of 2 years, I poured all of my money that I had set aside for this endeavor into it. Right. I bought a bunch of
Yeah.
renovation books at Home Depot and
Yeah.
YouTube. And my wife and I renovated everything from the floor we built countertops, we painted, we scraped this popcorn ceiling and repainted it,
Wow.
re roofed it, everything, painted the
Yeah.
outside of the house. So we did everything over 2 years. So remember, we bought it for 152,000 in June 2007. Then we
Yep.
poured $30,000 into it, so we had 182,000 in it. Right? We got it appraised 2 years later after full renovation, and it appraised for $68,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
my first foray into real estate resulted in me losing all my money and a negative net worth situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So that's a fork in the road.
Right.
Right? And
For
you
sure.
look at that and you say, and by the way, I mean that seems, I know that people listening to this and those of us that have built success, you look at that and you're like, okay, you did a bad deal, you lost 30 grand, okay, whatever, move on. But that was my whole world.
Yeah.
And bear in
Right.
mind too, I had never seen 30 grand before. Like
Yeah.
I grew up on food stamps, so I had no idea that whenever I deployed, that was a 9 month deployment to Afghanistan. 9 month deployment to Afghanistan, you're getting hazardous duty pay, you're getting extra pay, you're getting all of this money, but you're not spending anything.
Right.
And so it just builds up. You don't even look at a bank account when you're
Yeah.
deployed to
Right. Right.
Afghanistan on especially a pretty rugged deployment like what I had. It was
Hmm.
it was on an embedded training team. So it was me, a few other Marines, a bunch of Afghans, and an Army Special Forces, the ODA 171. And so we're living in mud huts, right? We're not checking
Yeah.
our bank accounts.
Yeah.
And so I get back, I'm like 30 grand. Like
Yeah.
this is
Right.
it's the most money I've ever seen in my
Yeah.
entire life.
Yeah.
Like, how could you possibly spend this much money, right?
Yeah.
That's
Right.
what it meant to me. And then to see all of it go away, like that's earth shattering,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
future defining. And
Yeah. I bet
so,
you wanted to strangle Robert Kiyosaki at that point.
yeah, I was like, yeah, I mean, like I can tell you, I don't, I credit there was a real estate agent that I knew. His name was Larry, and I haven't spoken to him in a decade, and we're not friends or anything like that. He wasn't even that nice of a guy, but
Yeah.
he did tell me something that clicked in my mind, because like once we got that appraisal back, I was like, oh my God, like I don't, whoa, what do we do here? And I remember Larry saying, hey, listen, I know your house has depreciated by 50%, but so
Yeah.
has every other house because the market
Right.
crashed.
Yeah.
So what you're going to find is that houses are half as expensive as they were before. But this is a military town. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq are raging right now. Troop strength is going up. They're infusing money into the military, which means BAH is going up. In a military town, the basic allowance for
Yeah.
housing
Right.
equates to rent.
Rent. Yep.
So housing prices cut in half, rent went up. What's the strategy there?
Yep.
Buy
Rent
rental
it out.
properties, right?
Rent it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rent it out
Yeah.
to cover the mortgage, and then
Yep.
continue to try to buy rental properties. So what I would say to people who face a massive loss or a massive obstacle or piece of adversity, really the biggest thing is whenever you screw something up and it's your fault. This was my fault. A half a second look on Zillow would have told me that,
Yeah.
hey, the market's
Sure.
already crashing. If I had
Yeah.
turned on the news, they were
Yeah.
already talking about Lehman Brothers and everything, right?
Yeah. Right.
So like I
You
look
were
at
busy
that.
doing the reno.
I was busy. Yeah. All I had to do was take a half a second to look at it and be like, even the 1% rule, like all I had to do was look at the fact that it was going to rent for $800 a month and I was
Yeah.
paying 152,000. That won't cash flow.
Right.
So, so like anything I could have done with 30 seconds of work or knowledge, I could have avoided that.
Yeah.
So it was my fault and it was on me. Right.
Yeah.
And when you do something that you screw up and it's on you, the temptation is to blame other things, to blame external
Sure.
things. Oh, the market crashed. It's not my fault. But when you do that, you miss an incredibly important opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
Right. And I have this full mantra now that like there are only two outcomes to any engagement for me. And this is for real. This is something I decide. I either win or I find the lesson. I win or I
Yeah.
learn. Right. And I have
Yep.
had many opportunities since then to learn.
Yeah. Sure.
Right. I'm in the middle of
Yeah.
one right now
Yeah.
where it's, again, Fed raised rates and it's like, oh my God, these things that
Yeah.
were going to be amazing are now not so amazing.
Right.
And what do I learn from this? How do I, right? So you're going to have failures and obstacles and everything, but don't ever waste a good failure. Like there are
No.
incredible learning opportunities that you just will not get out of success because all you do is focus on the success.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So you obviously didn't, say screw this and get out of the real estate industry. You found the lessons and you stuck it out, and here you are today, right?
Yeah, one of the most powerful lessons I would say is I still own that house, actually.
Do you
So
really?
I rented it
That's
out,
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so that house was 152. It, after renovation was worth 68. And we ended up when I changed duty stations, I rented it out for 800, 850, something like that.
Yeah.
And it didn't cash flow at all because I paid 152 for it.
Right.
And so, but it broke even kind of, right?
Yeah.
And then, over time, I just held on to it. I didn't have a
Yeah.
choice. I couldn't sell it.
Yeah. Right.
Rent went up, rent kept going
Yeah.
up, then going up. And it's not crazy, but it's rented for like 1550 right now.
Yeah.
And whenever this was back when Obama did the TARP, you remember the TARP or
Yeah.
all that. So I reworked the financing to
Okay.
where it was on like a 40-year and they lowered the interest rate to like 3.75 when
Yeah.
it started at 6.75.
Yeah.
So the lower interest rate plus a longer repayment period. And so my mortgage now is like, I think like $700, $680 a month, and it's rented out for
Sure.
1550,
Yeah.
and it's now worth about 275,000,
Right. Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
owe 125 on it.
Yeah.
So here's my point: in rental real estate, time is the most
Yes.
powerful thing that exists. It's not location, location, location. That's a factor, but I
Yeah.
would rather have a fantastic deal structure than the right location.
Right.
I'll absolutely pick up properties in, a depreciating market if you're giving me 20 cents on the dollar,
Yeah.
right? Or if you're
Yeah.
going to seller finance at 1%,
Yeah.
right? So like to me, it's not about location. That is a factor. It's about the structure of the deal and then time. Like just remember one thing for anybody listening to this: don't wait to buy real estate. You buy real estate and wait because
Yeah.
time compounds the increase in rent, the amortization, the tax benefits, the appreciation and the growth, and that bundle of benefits all together will
Yeah.
set you free.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That was a great little nugget right there. And probably a good place to wrap this up. So what what's the best way for anybody that would be interested in going down that path, down that journey? Real estate, I remember when I thought about real estate for probably 10 years before I actually made the leap. Like, it was such a scary thing for me for whatever reason, and because of that, I just didn't do anything with it. And then, once I bought that first property, within 6 months, I think I bought like 4. So I mean,
Yeah.
made the leap. You're like, oh, this is nowhere near as difficult or scary
Scary.
as what I thought it would be. And yeah, I had and one of my first 1 or 2 kind of had some nightmare experiences similar to yours as well, but persevered through. So yeah, what would be the best ways to follow you and to find out more about what you have to offer?
Yeah, so we're, as part of this community that we launched, the Veterans Financial Freedom, it's forced me to like stop being such a private person.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I am growing my Instagram channel and YouTube channel, and you can find me on Facebook. My name's Buddy Rushing. You can find me, like, if you look me up on Instagram, just type in Buddy Rushing. Like, I should
yeah,
be the first one that pops up if I've done my job right.
yeah,
And you can put the links in the show notes.
yeah.
But
Oh, for
yeah, I
sure,
would
we will.
say,
Yeah,
so if you follow me on Instagram and you look in the profile, you'll find a link to veteransforfinancialfreedom.org, or you can just go to veteransforfinancialfreedom.org
yeah,
and you can find out information about everything we're doing there. And
beautiful.
actually you can apply to join the community there. And
Yeah,
it's a free community. So
awesome. Yeah, we will get that linked up for everybody as well. But thank you so much, buddy, for your time today. It's been an awesome conversation, and thanks for sharing it.
absolutely. Thank you.